Welcome, everyone, to Partner Up with Amy Carroll. As a communication coach, trainer, speaker, and author, I'm delighted to be your host and excited to bring you insights and ideas to help you solve your communication conundrums. This is my 39th episode of my show, Partner Up with Amy Carroll. If you want to find out more about me or what the show's about, feel free to listen to previous episodes on my website, carrollcoaching.com, or the VoiceAmerica business channel. Be sure to download the app, or you can always tune in using your favorite podcast app. If you missed last week's show from May 21st, I interviewed Alan Carroll. Nope, not a relative, just sharing the same family name, which is funny because he even spells it with 2 R's and 2 L's, which is kind of rare. And Alan and I discussed how, through the practice of mindfulness speaking, you can reduce physical, emotional, and mental tension. So you're going to want to check that out from May 21st. And today, my favorite guest, T, is back, my social media gal and sidekick. Welcome, T.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Amy.
All right. So T, before we jump into our Q&A, you and I talked a couple weeks ago, and I remember you said you had some partner success story.
Absolutely. It seems to be happening more often these days, and I'm practicing.
Well, let's hear about it.
Okay, so do you remember that? Give the details. Do you remember I said to you I was practicing compassion?
Yeah.
Really trying to be in a compassion mindset. If anything upset me or felt like the balance was going off, or my daughter stressed me out, or my dog, or basically staying in compassion as much as possible. So recently I had a friend who was having a bit of a rough deal, going through lots of stress, and I offered to take her lunch. So I said, you just relax. I'll come to you. I'll bring lunch already cooked. It'll be hot. And her sister was going to join us. So that was the deal, basically. Now the sisters between them have some difficulties with communication. So
yes. I think many siblings can relate to that. Yes,
absolutely. I've got 3. And you've got how many sisters?
3 brothers, 3 sisters.
There we go. So we know what happens there with family issues and such. And I was about to turn up maybe half an hour later than they had expected for this lunch date, and called. I was in the car. The food was hot. I was about to arrive.
And just out of curiosity, T, because I'm always impressed by people who whip up hot meals. You didn't
wasn't
just
so whipped up.
You didn't pop into a store to purchase things. You spent a few hours putting this together.
It was no deli lunch, and it wasn't, takeaway. It was me peeling, cooking, preparing the menu. And I'd started to do so the night before.
Wow.
I wanted to make something super special. So it had taken up most of my evening and also most of the morning in between some work duties to get this ready. Okay. So I'd really put my heart and soul into it and wanted them to have a nice special time. So as I called to let them know that I was leaving, about a half an hour journey to get to them, in that time that they'd been together, something had gone on. Something had happened. So basically a kind of a sister fallout,
a half an hour alone with no food.
Just half an hour. They were hungry, right? What do you say to be being partner mode, be fed and watered? And so they were hungry. They had fallen out, and the second sister had decided she was not even going to hang around for the meal.
Wow.
And she told me that. And so I had to think about what she just said. Couldn't quite believe my ears. And the other sister had already said then that, yes, let's forget it kind of thing. And I took it with that big capital C, compassion, and my partner pants on, and said, okay, very calmly, staying in partner mode, although I wanted to scream down the phone. What? Yeah, I stayed super calm. I just thought to myself, well, guess my daughter and I get to eat this amazing meal for at least the next 3 meals at home because there was so much of it. Stayed cool, stayed calm, and turned the car around, went home and thought, right, I can get on with other stuff at home, get back to work. No biggie. I shocked myself. I really
bet.
did. Yeah. At the same time, I knew there was going to be a point that I would see the girls again, and that would probably be an opportunity to discuss what happened and also to vent maybe, or let them know how I felt. I was disappointed and frustrated, basically.
And being disappointed and frustrated is totally understandable. And I love that you
Right.
were thinking, and it would be appropriate, acceptable, and okay for me to express that to them another time.
Another time. This is also something that you've taught me, Amy. It's to walk away and let the dust settle almost. And then we spoke about the broken glass.
Right.
Right. You remember
Yeah,
that?
you've
But
been
this
already
is
been
to
working
another
that on
level.
your own.
Right. Absolutely. And so the phone did ring the next day, and it was the first sister who had decided to leave the occasion and cancel the whole deal. And she tried to ring me on the evening, and I was in the shower. So luck had it all, life had worked out that it was going to be the next day. And to be honest, that was the time I needed. I needed to let it sink in, practice in my head how I was going to handle it, let her know that I was upset. And that also kind of telling myself it was no big deal. Nobody had died. Nobody was sick. There'd been no accidents, really putting it into perspective. And thinking of it as a win-win. Like I said, we got to eat this beautiful meal with my daughter for lunch, breakfast, dinner for the next couple of days. So yeah, I had that very calm conversation with her, and she apologized and said, well, it just all worked out really well. And I kind of let her speak, the tell me more, the 3 little words.
Yeah.
I didn't go guns a-blazing and I was able to stay calm, and I really did partner with a capital P. That's all I kept thinking, is just staying partner. So
And
again,
T, I'm going to interrupt you a second. We're just getting our engineers just inviting you to speak up louder.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
I'll get close to the mic. And
so you had that mantra almost, stay partner, stay partner.
Absolutely. It really was with me, and it is with me all the time now. And it works beautifully.
And I guess it felt satisfying or rewarding, or
how did it
when
feel?
When she apologized?
Yeah. Do you know what? It was even further, more than that. I felt like I'd gone a step further in this practice. So I felt really proud of myself more than anything. After the calm conversation, I felt proud.
Oh,
so thanks to you again. And also so little stress. It could have been a super stressful conversation. Sure. It could have been a super stressful, the whole thing could have been crazy, everybody shouting at everybody. So thank you again.
Oh, wow.
Success story.
That's a great example of putting our ego to the side. And I love that you have already been actively working on cultivating compassion. And
that's right.
We don't know where or when it's going to happen. And boy, is that an example of it.
You just never know. I mean, I couldn't have imagined ever that the lunch date was going to be cancelled with my friends. And it was, and it happens. It's life, so you got to be ready. Right. I think this is the 3rd year that we've been working together, Amy, right?
Yes.
So I've had some
We've had our anniversary, work anniversary just recently.
We did last week. Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you. So yeah, it's taken me 3 years to get there. And I have to say, when you get there, it's super satisfying.
Yes.
Super satisfying. Yeah.
And I had to laugh when you kind of found yourself a little bit surprised, like what just happened?
Yeah.
Why am I so calm?
Myself.
Yeah. Yeah. That's happened to me multiple times.
Well, I think you talk about the brain waves and things happen in the brain, making new pathways in the brain. So it feels like it's they're definitely carved out now.
Got it. Yeah. So it's becoming your new automatic. Right. That's significant.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Huge leap. So feeling great.
Oh, well, thanks for sharing that, T. So let's go ahead and jump into, we've got a couple of juicy case scenarios that people submitted.
That's right. We do indeed. Where did they come from, Amy? How did these cases come up?
This material, this content came from a workshop I did last year, and I think I had 260 people, so it was more like a webinar.
Okay.
And I invited the participants to submit prior to the webinar their conflict situations, and I think there were 3 different questions I asked them.
Absolutely, there are indeed. So the three questions were, what are the things that trigger you and bring you to conflict? What are the things that enable you to build resilience in order to manage conflict successfully? And what's an example of an unsuccessful personal or professional conflict you have had? So,
Yes.
did you have all 260 people responded to you?
Thank God,
These
no.
three questions.
No, I did have a lot
of information.
Yeah, I think we've got a couple more episodes before we get through all of these.
Great. Okay. So the first case deals with emotional mastery, Amy, finding a balance and preserving relationships, something that we all need and that I can really relate to after what happened last week. The first case is Monica. I feel like that's right. Yeah. And the question. So let's start with Monica. And what does she say that triggers her and brings her to conflict?
She listed a couple of examples. One was when people are not reliable and don't follow through what we aligned on as a team.
Okay.
So when team members drop the ball.
Right.
Second one was when someone is not structured and things fall under the table. So maybe someone who's disorganized. Right. And then the third scenario was when someone is denying a mistake and trying to blame others.
Ooh. That can get ugly.
And it's so tempting. I have definitely been, that's kind of like an example of gaslighting. Oh, no, it wasn't me. But, and I'm staying there with the ice cream. No, I didn't steal. What? I didn't.
Yeah, we've all been there, haven't we? And I think as you grow older, you realize that you just got to take it on the chin and put your hands up.
It saves so much stress.
Yeah, doesn't it?
In the end. Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. What else is Monica?
What I would say when I listen to those examples, T, is I would say what's important here is if you want to preserve the relationship, then we're going with the assumption that giving feedback, that the way you want to handle these situations is you got to confront the people and give feedback, and that the feedback needs to be well thought out. And when and when it's delivered free of sarcasm or angry comments.
Yes. Okay.
So one of the things, going back to your story, that I caught when you were talking about it was how you were glad that it worked out. Serendipity was such that you were in the shower when the phone rang.
Yeah.
So it reduced that likelihood of you taking the call and having the conversation before you were ready to.
Exactly. And I did think, should I call back? And nope, wasn't the right moment. Definitely needed to have that full 24 hours before I felt ready.
Oh, that's smart. You checked in with yourself. Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes we want to jump in and have a conflict because we're the victim and we are feeling righteous and justified and we want to make that other person wrong.
Of course.
Or we're afraid to have conflicts. So we just want to get it over with. Oh my gosh, I'll never sleep tonight if I don't deal with this now. And for you to have that presence of mind and say, nope, I'm putting the relationship at higher importance than getting this off my chest now.
That is really on point, because I am somebody that doesn't like to go to sleep on an argument. And this was a different type of going to sleep on an argument, if you like. I do, I value the relationship that I have with this girl, and I needed to have it all straight in my head, really.
Yeah.
So
yeah, very smart. So for me, what's interesting is Monica then talks about things that enable her to build resilience in order to manage conflict successfully. And, she talks about these situations that trigger conflict, and then the response she has is what helps her to be resilient is take time before providing feedback. Ding, ding,
there
ding,
we go. There we go.
Otherwise, the feedback is too emotional, not objective, right? We've been saying that. So Monica's on top of this. Good. And then she said something else. She said, talk to someone about it that will help bring the situation into perspective.
Great idea.
Because sometimes people can see things from a perspective that we can't see
totally
in the moment ourselves.
Yeah. And that's something you've also taught me, is to always kind of see how it goes with somebody else, check in with somebody else, a friend or a family member, and see what they think about it all. So very useful.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll interrupt for a second. And I don't know if I've ever shared this on the show. I once had to have a difficult conversation. This was back in 2005, and it was a big deal, and I felt under a lot of pressure. And I talked to several different people. And I'm going to say probably it was a total of 14 hours of conversations and venting.
You
and
told me that. Yes, you did mention that on the show last time.
Okay, good.
Right.
So this is a reminder for people. Hey, guys, it's going to sometimes take a lot to clean that up. And, that's extreme 14 hours, except
it is.
Right. The good news is I don't have to do that every time. And in a way that was like kind of a one-time investment, and the skill building and the ahas have continued to pay off for me. Fabulous. So now my preparation time is not nearly as long.
Well, I hope so, because 14 hours a day is some serious homework. Okay, so what else did Monica say? Examples of an unsuccessful personal or professional conflict. What example did she give us, Amy?
She said, this was the scenario. We were close to an important send out date with my team. We realized that one important task hadn't been done yet. I asked the colleague who was responsible why it wasn't done. And she then acknowledges, I did this in front of the rest of the team. And then she admitted to going, she said, I became very frustrated. Oof, we can see this is going down the wrong path.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then she was brave enough to admit, she said, my colleague was very offended. And it ended up slowing down her work even more, which then led to a delay. Yeah. So talk about making a situation worse.
Absolutely.
And then Monica went on to say that we talked the day after, and this woman admitted to Monica that she was really hurt, that she had addressed the situation in front of everyone. And then Monica's, last thing she says was, understandable.
Right.
And I felt really bad. So the good news is Monica was not in a place of denial or fighting or pushing back. She was already in a place of, oh yeah, I really handled this poorly. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and so ideally she should have pulled this colleague aside.
Exactly. Okay. You just never want to confront someone. I won't say never. There might be sometimes it is appropriate to give feedback in a group setting. Often it's not. Because here's the problem. And Monica confronted her, and then she showed her frustration. And what that did was that then created that Monica now is contributed negatively to her reputation, that, when Monica gets upset, she might bite your head off.
Call you out. Yeah.
Yeah. Call you out
in front of everybody.
Right. So one thing, as I was thinking about this, so not only does Monica need to clean it up with the woman individually, which she did do, ideally, Monica would probably also want to acknowledge that the way she handled it was not appropriate, doing this to the entire group with that woman there, and maybe letting the woman know beforehand, hey, you were right. I shouldn't have handled that way. And I want to acknowledge to the group that was wrong. Are you okay if I do that?
Okay.
And that really empowers the other woman to choose. And also, she gets public acknowledgement for.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So if I understand correctly, and it was me that had done this, I would go back to the person that I'd offended and ask her if she was okay, if I could apologize publicly to the rest of the group. Is that correct?
And acknowledge. No, you're not quite apologizing. You acknowledge your error.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Because you don't want to slip into prey of, I'm a terrible person. You just want to say, and this is a sign for me, this is a quality of a powerful leader, to acknowledge mistakes publicly and, say, because that goes a long way for rebuilding that trust.
Right.
And sense of safety.
With the rest of the group.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Fantastic. Okay, so let's hop into case 2. Case 2 is Julia. Okay, and her questions were around the topic of agreeing to disagree, finding a balance, and preserving relationships. So what were the things that triggered Julia and brought her to conflict, Amy?
She had 2 examples. She said inconsistent, unfair behavior of superiors.
Ooh.
And when I point to an obviously ineffective process and the superior won't listen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Unfairness then, and problematic with superiors. Let's see. What was she able to do to build resistance to better manage her conflict? My dog just sneezed.
To build resilience.
Resilience, yes.
Oh, is that your dog?
That was my doggy sneezing at my feet.
Oh, there's a little foot shower.
Lovely. Oh. So how did she build her resilience to better manage conflict?
Well, you want to prepare for difficult professional talks beforehand. Mm-hmm. So I guess these are more my thoughts for Julia's situation. So preparing for difficult professional talks beforehand with good arguments, positive attitude. No, I take that back. This is coming from Julia. I had some thoughts for her after that.
Okay. Right.
So she's saying having a positive attitude, which is fantastic. She also said not taking things personally, which is important. And
that's
then
difficult.
Oh, definitely.
Right.
Very difficult. Then to see that others may have good reasons. And this is where getting other people's opinion, and sometimes I have to invite my friends, don't just be my cheerleader and say, oh, that other person's terrible. Challenge me. I'm not always in a place where I want to hear it, though. I say, when I said, what am I missing here? So to see that others may have good reasons for their behavior, which they either can't share or I can't see. And I like about what Julie is saying here, what I'm hearing is that she's assuming positive intent.
That's a big one, isn't it? That's a big one.
Yeah.
If we can do so, then we can avoid conflict.
Yeah. And we can also, it helps us to find, this goes to the partner mindset technique of making up another story. We assume positive intent rather, and then we're likely to have empathy for the person. And then if we do decide to confront it, because we might still have to have some difficult, delicate, conflictual conversation, we're at least able to do it more likely as a partner. And I haven't defined those terms of predator partner on our show today yet, though the partner is holding high respect for themselves and for the other. So that is, that's where positive intent can support us.
And, Julia talks about talking to her superiors, right? So she may have a good idea or think that she's got a great idea. Superior may have more experience and know that this idea maybe won't work. So when the conflict comes in that kind of situation, she has to assume that the boss knows what he's talking about or she's talking about, right?
Well, let's talk about this next example, because Julia then shares a situation where there was this unsuccessful professional conflict. And so here in Julia's words, what she said was, I used to have a direct supervisor that I just did not get along with. My supervisor felt whatever I did or said was taken in the worst way.
Wow.
One example, of making startling, this was of many startling situations. She said, I confirmed with my supervisor that I was signed up for a specific training. Once it was open for registration. And when the training was open, she said, I signed up with a dedicated person within the team. And for some reason, she mentions that this dedicated person had the same rank as her direct supervisor, even though this person was not her direct supervisor.
Okay.
Then she goes on to explain, my supervisor got mad at me when I excluded her from this exchange. Actually, for me, there was nothing else to discuss since we had already agreed. And I saw no need to take more of her time for something that was obvious. So here she was, Julia had positive intention to not waste her direct supervisor's time. Though this was only one example, she said, in the end, after many conflicts for really small things, I felt there was no way out of this negative vibe between us. And I asked to be reassigned to a different supervisor. However, I still felt that I had failed in this relationship because I did not understand why we did not manage to get along.
Okay.
And I think it's great that Julia looks back on this scenario as a failure because, she didn't resolve it. And I think one of the challenges many people have is this fear of confronting another person, because that's what I would recommend. And it's especially difficult to confront someone if they're senior to us or if they're our boss. And that was her
Absolutely,
case.
yeah.
So I don't know
Right.
all the details. I don't know if Julia ever did attempt to. I know many people avoid it.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I wonder if Julia had the ability, had the skills and the confidence to go to her direct supervisor and calmly and respectfully question her supervisor about these issues. And, there's a chance, no guarantee, there's a chance that could have gotten resolved.
Mm-hmm.
So many of us, we avoid going to have the difficult, delicate conversation either because we're too intimidated or we're not sure how to do it and increase the chance of being successful. Though, let's say, T, if you were my direct supervisor and I was Julia, and it might sound something like this. T, I was wondering if we could find some time to talk this week because I have a couple of concerns I'd like to discuss. So slow, calm, ask permission, and then we're going to set up a dedicated time. You say yes. And, and then I might give you a little more information. It seems like we've had a couple of disagreements over the last few weeks. And I was wondering if we could talk through so that you come into that conversation and you're not surprised.
Okay.
And then, I'm delivering it slow and calm. I may be asking questions. I'm allowing for pausing. I'm wondering, asking T, can you help me understand what your rationale was for that? T, I've seen a couple of times where I've said something and you've responded in a way that I made up a story that you were upset with me. So there are ways to have those difficult, delicate conversations, though it takes training and awareness and practice.
Boy, oh boy, and courage, right? Because
a lot of courage
in the lion's den or in the firing line, as it were, it's kind of like you don't know what's going to happen. And if you're already having those conflicts on a regular basis anyway, who wants to go and put their head in the lion's mouth?
Right. Well, the thing is, that's why you want to address it sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
So we're going to take a break. And when we come back from break, we want to hear more about some of these challenges of agreeing to disagree. Stay tuned. You are listening to Partner Up with Amy Carroll on the Voice America Business Channel. Welcome back to Partner Up with Amy Carroll. I'm here with my social media woman, T, and we are discussing communication challenges and conflict. So, T, what's our next challenge?
Okay. Yeah. So we're heading into case 3. This is all about agreeing to disagree, finding a balance, and preserving relationships. And our third case is Angela. So the question for her was, what are the things that enable you to build resilience in order to manage conflict successfully? Tell us what Angela had to say.
It was so simple. She said, a network of supportive people around me.
Oh, beautiful.
And we talked about this in the first half a little bit. You got to have your people. You got to have the people who will be there to support. And you also need to know what you need in the moment. So I've got friends who will absolutely play the devil's advocate and push back and challenge me, except I may not be ready right in the moment. So at first I might need to lick my wounds or, have a little pity party. And then, I can let them know. So it's important that you've got these people who will support you and challenge you. And you also might need to let them know what you need in a given moment so that it coordinates. Because sometimes I had my friend, really push back and challenge me. And I just, burst into tears because she's like, oh no, we're not there yet.
And that's also something that you taught me, actually, Amy, is you say, push back if you don't agree.
Yeah.
And something that I've started to implicate too, if you're having a discussion or, there's an important subject to be discussed.
Well, and it works. And I do that because you and I are my team member, we have an unequal power dynamic. So I think it's important that the senior person always encourages and invites other people to push back. And if you're, can be delicate times, you might say, you definitely push back. Just check with me if I'm ready to hear it.
Right.
It's about knowing yourself and where you're at.
Yeah. Great. Okay. So the next case we have is age versus credentials. what were the things that Chris found triggered him and brought him to conflict? Age versus credentials.
Chris said, I'm sometimes brought to conflict when I work in a project team where there are other members, they try to delegate almost all tedious tasks to me. So in this case, George is a subordinate. It's usually,
Chris.
Did I say Chris?
Yeah. Thinking about George.
Did I say George or did you say?
You said George.
I said George. That's
Must be George Clooney again.
Oh, George Clooney, always on my mind. Okay, so let's go back to Chris now. So Chris said it usually happens when I'm the most junior person on the team. And I understand that more senior colleagues may be reluctant to take care of the more mundane duties. However, I wouldn't like to be perceived as my senior colleague's secretary. It's not my role. So that's an important distinction. So I just like that Chris is naming this thing, saying, yeah, this is not cool. This is not okay. And sometimes it can really irritate me. So then Chris goes on to talk about things that build resilience to better manage conflict. And he says, I always try to be empathic towards the person with whom I'm having conflict. I do my best to understand their motivations and point of view. In this way, I try to come up with a solution that could be a win-win for both. So that's pretty high level, high emotional intelligence stuff that Chris is doing there. That's the pretend not to notice. No, it's not pretend not to notice. That's the make up another story when someone's being difficult. And that, as I said earlier in the first half, it accesses our empathy. So then it's easier to stay in this place of partner where you're holding high respect for yourself and for the other. And I would add to that, when you're having that conversation with someone that could feel like conflict, is to ask questions and do active listening, summarize. That slows down the process, that helps the other person feel heard and acknowledged, and it's helping you to make sure you heard what they said and that that's what they intended to say. So the summarizing, paraphrasing, don't underestimate how important that tool is.
Okay. And what was Chris's example of an unsuccessful personal or professional conflict?
Chris says he feels tension that could potentially lead to a conflict with a colleague who's currently this person's peer. He said we were competing for a promotion to become the team leader. My colleague had been with the firm longer than me, yet I had more academic credentials. If I'm lucky to get the promotion, I wonder, how should I manage this conflict? So I think something that's important to pay attention to is that Chris is assuming that there'll be conflict. So sometimes when there's tension, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to turn into conflict. And I guess one other thing I want to say, this is such a common scenario. A number of my coachees have experienced this.
Right.
And in this situation, I often recommend the person who got the promotion, in this case, if it was Chris, that they reach out to their colleague to talk about the potential discomfort or disappointment. Perhaps ask them if there's anything they want to say or suggestions they have, since they do have, more experience. Acknowledge that. Say, I'd like to take advantage of that because you have a lot of value to offer. So I think just validating them is important.
So would that be seen as getting somebody on side?
Yeah. Yeah, getting them on board.
Okay, sounds great.
Yeah, and I feel like if you go to that person and say, "Hey, listen, let's say it's you and I, and let's say I'm Chris and I got the promotion and you didn't. Hey, T, thanks for coming to talk to me. I guess I wanted to acknowledge the elephant in the room. And I don't know if it's true for you, T. If it was the other way around and you had gotten the position and I didn't, I realized I might be feeling some disappointment and some frustration. And so I wanted to give you a chance in case that was true for you, if you wanted to acknowledge that, and maybe it's not true for you, maybe you're just fine to, that it worked out the way it did. I don't know, though. I really want to open up the discussion and hear from you.
Yeah, I get it.
So
Makes
that
sense.
that wasn't done so eloquently, though. I said what I need to say, and then I shut
Mhm.
up and I give you a chance, and maybe I might do that in an email if saying it to you face to face might be a bit too sensitive or delicate, or I'm not feeling comfortable, or I'm not sure you'll feel comfortable.
Okay.
So I think it's just important to acknowledge the elephant in the room.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. T, I think now is probably the perfect time for us to stop and play the interview with Colin.
Yes.
Listeners, this is an interview I did a couple of years ago. It's very short, and you're going to want to listen how my interviewee, Colin Jones, managed to stay partner in the lion's den. Okay, listen up, and we'll be back shortly. Okay, so we're back.
Yeah.
T, anything else you wanted to comment on about that interview?
Yeah, the bravery aspect from Colin to literally step into that room with the salespeople that he maybe would have avoided if he hadn't done your training. He felt like he was equipped and ready to go and be partner in that, literally in that lion's den, and flip the whole situation around. I mean, that was just a great example.
Yeah, and he surprised himself too.
Didn't he? Yeah. Enjoyed it. Okay, so after Colin Jones, let's go on to Philippa. This is case number 5. How to be assertive and dealing with gossip at work, and also dealing with confrontation. So a few things in there. What were the things that triggered Philippa, Amy?
She said sentences and behaviors which sometimes are perceived by myself as personal, professional threats, repeated insults, shouting and bad language. Ooh, wow. Intentional bad manners and mean behavior. So for me, Philippa is describing a pretty hostile environment.
Isn't she just? Yeah.
Yeah. And my sense is, that's not a sustainable environment. It's
No.
also possible that she's showing up as too nice or too polite or too respectful, and that might be triggering predator reactions from people.
Right.
Not suggesting for a moment that this is her fault. What this is suggesting is she may, if that is true, she may have the ability to turn things around. And in fact, I'm going to address that shortly about how one might deal with that. So when she responds, she also talked about some of the things that enable her to build resilience in order to manage conflict. And Philippa strikes me as someone very generous, because the things she listed were patience, positivity, objectivity, relativity. So she's really wanting to
work things out,
pay attention to what part, how her brain is interpreting things. Even as she wrote the thing about the things that trigger her, she said things that I perceive. So she's even taking responsibility of, hey, maybe it's not true. This is the story I'm making up. She's also talking about other things that build resilience are accepting maybe the other person's having a bad day. So another way to not take it personally.
Yeah.
And then she also says, or they're just not a nice person, which,
well, if
could
they're
be the case.
shouting and using all this bad language in the workplace.
Yeah.
Not great.
So an example that she gave us specifically, she said, a colleague of mine has always been very nice to me. One day I found out that she was gossiping about me and my behavior with negative comments all the time. So that must have been quite a shock, right? This woman's being nice, the example of being very two-faced.
Right.
So what she did was she kindly approached her twice, asking if she had done anything wrong. And the woman said there was nothing wrong with me, nothing she wanted to discuss. So,
she shut the door.
This just whole description sounds like a toxic environment. And I'm not sure that Philippa was ever going to be successful in that kind of situation, though I love how brave she was to confront that person and to do it in such a kind way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would you do if somebody was gossiping about you, or there's gossip at work?
What would I do? I would have to really take some time to get my ego out of it.
Yeah.
I might put it in an email because that would be a little less confrontive for the person. I would say
Okay.
things like, hey, Susan, I heard something that really surprised me, and I wanted to check it out with you. And
That's
I
already very different, if I can just jump in there, because what Philippa says is she asked if she'd done anything wrong. And now for me, that rings a bell as she's
pray.
kind of acting as prey.
Yeah,
So
it's almost she's being a little too generous of
too generous. What did I do, kind of thing. Whereas
Yeah, that's a good catch.
And how did you phrase it? Just repeat what you said just prior to me butting in.
I don't know if I can repeat it. Let me think. I wanted to check in with you about something that surprised me.
That's it.
And
Something that surprised me. That's a great way of.
Yeah. So doing it by email gives you plenty of time to construct your phrase and do it over and over, get your ego out of it and say it in such a way that feels the least threatening possible and still, assertive. Like, I heard this thing, gosh, I was surprised. I'm wondering if, and you don't want to give the other person too much, like, oh, I'm sure they completely misunderstood. No, this is what I heard. It doesn't sound like something that would come from you. Can you help me understand?
Okay. Yeah.
And the thing is, and maybe this worked in Philippa's case, because sometimes the person may not admit or take responsibility or apologize, though just you confronting them sometimes might be enough for you to say, you're on notice. That was not okay. Don't do it again.
Right.
So we don't know. Though the thing is, Philippa then asked, Amy, how do you turn from being a prey to a partner with the same person? So it sounds like Philippa has a sense that maybe she is a bit too much prey.
Right. Yeah.
And she said, how do you do it? How do you change, to become more partner with a person over time, respectfully? Of course, this is super important for her. And not be perceived aggressively, which would be probably unlikely that she would. Because by now they know you're acting as a prey.
Right.
So
how do we do it?
You got to first practice the behaviors of partner. Speaking with a strong voice, downward inflection, still body. In this case with Philippa, maybe making sure she's not over apologizing. We heard that from the podcast interview with Colin, that, he realizes even if it's a cultural thing, I'm replacing the sorry with thank you.
Yeah.
And so she would need to first train for a while the behaviors of strong, solid partner, maybe audio record herself, maybe video record herself. Okay. Then she's going to need to start to practice in safer environments, and then eventually with this colleague. Though she's got to be prepared, because if the colleague's used to being predator and she's been prey, when she shows up as partner, often the predator wants to become more predator. So Philippa needs to be mentally prepared for the likelihood of that happening.
So is there always a kind of crossover time where it could ramp up the predator, then Philippa's staying partner, then the other person on opposite is still more and more predator? When does the balance come? Is it like the respect that you have to earn from them?
Most predators are not able to maintain predator for a long time. Though what's important is you not dip back, the other person doesn't dip back down to prey, because then you're not even starting from zero, you're starting below zero because you've reinforced the behavior.
Okay.
Yeah. Hey, so T, we're out of time.
Already? Oh my goodness, that flew by.
I know.
We've got so much more to talk about.
Well, I guess we're just gonna, whatever questions we didn't get to, we'll just pick them up the next time.
Great.
So as we're wrapping up today, what is one call for action that you have for listeners?
My call to action, as it's been working for me, is to have a little bit more compassion every day. So just take it one step further.
And what's a sentence or something that you can trigger more compassion?
Trigger, it would be probably the direct would be what goes on at home. If you kind of less patient with the people that are close to you. So bringing that compassion in at home, and just giving people a little more time and using your empathy ears.
Cool. So listen, for listeners, if you want to send your communication conundrums, clashes, challenges, mishaps, blunders, and successes, and you'll have a chance to hear it on the show. T and I will discuss, debate it, and offer some suggestions. You can do that via email, amy@carrollcoaching.com, which is 2 R's and 2 L's, or on any of my social media channels. And be sure to tune in, switch on, listen up, and be inspired next week, Friday, June 4th, when I am dealing with a more juicy communication conundrums and interview Dr. Katrina Burros. We're going to be discussing the difference between a demanding leader and a brilliant jerk. And what are the fears of a brilliant jerk and how to develop a brilliant jerk's interpersonal skills. Yes. Remember, these are live stories, real lives. If you're ready to take your superhero partner powers into the next decade, join me for my online leadership presence course. Check out my website for more information, carrollcoaching.com, or you can, as I said a moment ago, check with me on social media. I'll be hopping over to Facebook Live 5 minutes past the hour for a short chat on today's call. T, thank you. It's been a lovely conversation.
Thank you, Amy. It was great.
Super. Thanks, listeners. You've been listening to Partner Up with Amy Carroll on the Voice America Business Channel.